Hello and a good afternoon and Happy New Year. My name is Beth Upton. I am the host of the Trust Fundraising Hub on Facebook and now on Twitter and on LinkedIn as well. And this is an experiment for me. I am using StreamYard to try and stream live across Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn at the same time, so that people aren't excluded if they choose not to use one or more of those social mediums. So while I wait for everyone to join me, I'm just going to double check on my other screen over here whether or not I show up as live, really. So if you can see me and you want to write a comment, please write a comment. The point of these Q&As is that you guys log on and you ask me questions live. I'm definitely live on Facebook, so that's something. And I will answer your questions. I've had a couple of questions submitted in advance, and I'm really happy to go with those. But otherwise, oh, look, there looks like I'm live on. Looks like I'm live on LinkedIn as well, which is very exciting. And so do dive in and ask me any questions. I'm not quite sure how the comment thing works. I think this is going to be an experiment for all of us. It's really weird seeing yourself on another screen, especially with a time delay, but nice to see that I've got some subtitles going on there. I can't work out where it goes on Twitter. I don't know on Twitter. I have to be really honest. I'm hoping that I'm there and someone can see me, but who knows really? Maybe after this. No, there I am. I'm live streaming on my stream. There you go. So I can see myself on Twitter. I can see myself on the Money Tree fundraising page on LinkedIn, and I can see myself on Facebook. And there are no comments coming through onto StreamYard as yet. And what I'm going to do, as this is my first time and I am trialing it live with you all, I'm going to keep popping across and looking at the other screens in case people are writing comments that I'm not seeing. But so far, nothing. So hopefully that is a good sign. I'm going to dive into the first question, which I've been sent, which is a very common question we get asked, which is around helping someone find prospects. So if you are starting out in trust fundraising, or you're revamping your trust fundraising program for your organization, perhaps you're new to trust fundraising and you just don't know where to start. Where do you go about finding prospects? Should you pay for those subscription services? Can you get away without paying for that? So at Money Tree Fundraising, we do a lot of trust fundraising, and a lot of our research is using the free Charity Commission and Oscar Advanced Search services. There's also a free Funding Scotland programme. So if you're looking for Scottish trusts and Scottish work, we highly recommend that. We also use Grants Online, and we also use the GRIN database, GRIN. Both of those are paid for services. Another good place you can look is your competitors. Who are they putting in their annual reports and accounts that they're getting money from, and therefore is that something you can get a part of and compete against them for that money. But the Charity Commission, which is free, is as good a place as any for you to start. I think it needs some discipline to use the advanced search function well, but once you've got into that habit, then it works really well. There are paid for services. There are other free services, in fact. And what I would say about some of those, not naming names, is that not all search services and lists of grant makers are created equal. So we've done a lot of due diligence to choose the ones we've chosen. And just the others can be useful, but they have limitations. And particularly if you are newer in the field, I would say that your risk in using some of the other services, again, both free and paid for, could be that you're limiting your pool because they're not providing the right volume of results. So that's what I would say about that. But there's still particularly those free ones, they're still a really good place to start. You're not going to go wrong with a short list there. And still no comments. I'm just going to pop and check there are no comments across the groups that I don't think Twitter is working. It just seems to be scrolling. So hopefully I'm not missing out on loads of questions there. But that's my first question. And unless someone's got another one, and again, I'm trying to keep an eye. So hopefully I'm not missing you. If I am, I'm sorry. Before I dive into the next question, I wanted to highlight a comment that came up on the Trust Fundraising Hub this last week on Facebook. One of our members is also a grant maker, which is always, I've never done it. I should. I think it's a really useful development opportunity as a trust fundraiser to also be a grant maker. I also think it's a useful development opportunity for anyone in the sector to have to kind of assess other people's work. So if the opportunity comes up for you, I highly recommend you take it if you can. Anyway, this woman is also sits on a grant making board, and she has her organisation, I don't know who it is, has recently had an open call for funding, and she was saying that 1/3 of the applications they received were ineligible against their published criteria. So that is 1/3 of those applications that were wasted. It was a waste of effort on the part of whoever wrote them. It was a waste of hope on those organisations, because those monies will have gone into a pipeline. There will have been a probability put against it. There will have been some hope that they could have got that money, and they just were never going to. I think she explains on the Trust Fundraising Hub on Facebook that they fund organisations within a certain turnover. I think, I haven't got it open in front of me, that she said the top end is £1 million. I could be wrong. And that there was an organisation with a turnover of 14 million that applied. And you just think, did you just not read? Or did you think that the rules didn't count for you or something? But the other thing to remember when we're trying to get as much of that grant income coming to our causes as possible is that the more ineligible applications those grant makers have to sift through, it's also wasting their time and potentially wasting their money. They might find that they can't cope with the volume of applications based on their volunteer hours, and they have to pay an administrator. Now that money is coming out of money that would otherwise come to us, and if us, and I mean collectively, we are wasting that resource, then that's on us to fix. So I just wanted to really highlight that 1/3 of applications were a waste. I think that's something we should all reflect on in our practice, and when we're giving advice to smaller organisations and helping newer people start out, to really kind of bring that message home that there really is no point. As my friend Caroline Danks has written on Facebook today, it is quality over quantity when it comes to trust fundraising if you want a good strategy for going ahead. Hello, Helen. Helen asks, for those of you who are on a different platform, any tips for trying to demonstrate financial sustainability when you have a deficit budget? That's a really good question, because having a deficit budget does not demonstrate financial sustainability, Helen. Your organisation needs to have a plan for how it's getting out of that hole, I guess. A deficit budget is fine if you're talking about spending down a reserve or spending down a legacy. That you're going to spend more than you receive this year is absolutely fine if you've got the money in the bank to spend. Also, if you still have the money in the bank to spend after the last 2 years, kudos, that's pretty impressive. But otherwise, it isn't financially sustainable. Like, you can't demonstrate what isn't there. If it is vital to your beneficiaries that you spend more than you bring in at the moment for some life-changing thing, so say you, I don't know, are a food bank and there are more people than ever in need of support from your food bank, but your income isn't supporting it, you could probably argue that you need to spend more than you're raising to meet the need today. And that's why you're asking for more money, so that you can meet the need tomorrow as well. So I would say that it isn't about demonstrating financial sustainability if you're not financially sustainable. It's demonstrating why it's vital that you are not financially sustainable in the short term, and how the funders are going to support that, or what your longer term income generating strategy is. So this year we're having to spend more than we make, and it's going into our reserves for this reason. Next year we're going to rectify that because we're going to make sure we have a change of government. I guess you've got to come up with something that's within your power. We're investing now in fundraising. We expect that to pay off next year. You guys are going to fund us. That's how we're going to solve it. So something like that, I would say, Helen. But I never try and pretend something that isn't true, and probably a deficit budget isn't financially sustainable. So don't try and pretend it is. Don't try and make out that you're financially sustainable when you're not. My advice is open, honest discourse based on evidence of need. And it's probably one where you should pick up the phone. Excuse me, saying that I've just dropped my phone. Hold on. Sorry. One where you should pick up the phone and have conversation with the funders to help explain the situation, because it's not something that would easily come across in writing. I don't think, especially when you've got a limit to the number of words you can put into an application form. I hope that's helpful. Just quickly flicking across my other channels. There's nothing I can see on there. I have one notification. No, that's someone liking that I'm live. That's very nice. Thank you, James. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything else on Twitter. There are no other comments on Facebook. I'm disappointed that the only subtitles that have automatically come up are on LinkedIn, and I apologise for that. What I can say is that we will host these videos on YouTube after the event, and we will publish when we have hosted them on YouTube. And on YouTube, you're able to access them with captions. So they will be captioned after the event. I'm very sorry about today. This is my failing for not practicing in advance. It's not good enough. When I used to stream just on Facebook, it automatically came up. I naively assumed that would happen today, and I'm very sorry that that isn't happening. I will find a way to make that happen for next month. So the other question, while I wait to see if anyone else, not a question, but first I'm joining. Thanks, Beth, and everyone, really enjoying being part of the collective group. Thank you, Rebecca. I really appreciate that. I've really enjoyed being part of, kind of hosting and getting involved in the conversations in the Trust Fundraising Hub. We took it over from Alicia Granger about a year ago. It was sort of December 2020, and it's been really good fun. I've really enjoyed it. So thanks for the feedback. Someone else, Helen, any tips for a lottery full funding proposal this afternoon? Get off here and start writing it. Helen, a full funding application to the lottery. I'm afraid we haven't done one for ages because they changed their view on consultants and became quite anti-consultants a while ago. And so I have to be honest, I'm really, really out of practice on lottery applications. I'm really sorry. What I suggest is you come off this live and you actually ask that question in the group, because there are members of the group who've done lottery applications more recently than I have. And I don't want to give you a bum steer, particularly if you're having to do that this afternoon. So sorry, I can't help. But if something good comes up, what I might do is steal it and share it with a wider audience for next month. So that's that. So the other question that has come up this month is around, sorry, I'm flicking whilst I talk. The other question that's come up this month that someone has asked me to talk about is, what's a good strategy for trust fundraising? And it's absolutely hilarious because I've already name checked her once, but my good friend Caroline Danks, who is also an excellent trust fundraiser and major donor fundraiser, has tweeted this morning. And so I want to give her full credit for what she has said. And there's so much overlap in our advice, because I think, and I know my colleague Deanna agrees with me, Caroline's tweet seems to suggest she would agree with me too, and I don't want to put words in her mouth. I'm sure she'll come up and say if she doesn't. You don't need a strategy for trust fundraising. You don't need to innovate in trust fundraising. You don't need to wait for the next big thing in trust fundraising. Trust fundraising is your steady Eddie. Do it well, get really good at your skill, and you will do well as long as your cause is the type of cause that grant makers wish to fund. That is what I would say. We cannot influence grant makers, particularly in the short term, to change what they fund. That happens over a period of time, and that happens with relationships and longevity. But if you are talking about what's your strategy for increasing your trust fundraising in your organisation over the next 5 years, because most strategies are 3 to 5 years, these are the things you need to do. You need to set aside time for your prospect research. It is a valuable thing to do, and it mustn't be scrimped upon, and it needs to be revisited regularly. You cannot pay someone to come up with a list and then dine out on that for the next God knows how long, because grant makers change their criteria and grant makers come and grant makers go. So you need to regularly do your prospect research. You have your list, and then when you pick out your funder, you go back and you do that research on the day that you're writing the application to make sure you're absolutely on the money. We've already talked about making sure you fit with the criteria, but you've also got to read between the lines. You've got to go through their annual accounts. Who are they funding? How much are they funding? What does it look like when they get funding, rather than necessarily just what they say? Also, pick up the phone. Always, if you can, pick up the phone, have a conversation and build a relationship. So that's your first string of your strategy. The next string of your strategy is really good case for support. If your organization is not good at knowing what it wants to do, you are going to struggle to articulate something really compelling to a grant maker, and they're going to know that, and you are going to have a lower success rate. So your organization needs to be on board with some compelling, really good stuff that is worthy of that money. Now, you have a really important role in that as a trust fundraiser, in cajoling and working with your teams to help get the information from them and helping them see why it's useful to do this, that they might see as a sidetrack away from their day job. But you need that. The next thing you need is to be really good at writing. You need to be good at short sentences. You need to be good at succinctness. You need to be good at compelling. You need to be good at stories. If you are not an excellent writer, then just start writing. I don't write novels. I have a friend who runs writing workshops, and one of her biggest pieces of advice is just start writing. The more you write, the better your writing gets. But she also says the more you read, the better your writing gets. So if you've got out of the habit of reading, get back in the habit of reading. So that's what I would say. I have no idea if fiction versus non-fiction works, but I do know that the more frequently I read, the easier I find it to write. It's just part of the process. So we've got research, we've got something compelling to ask for, and it being well written. And the other end of it is your stewardship. So once you've got your grants, you need to steward your donors, make them feel looked after, and remind them that their money is well spent delivering their charitable aim through you, because that is what grant makers are. They are charities trying to reach a charitable goal. It's just that they do it by giving their money to us rather than delivering the services directly. So if you remind them that they are reaching their charitable goals by giving you this money, they will give you more money more regularly, and that it will build a bond of trust, and you will end up with larger grants. So those are the 4 things I would say: research, case for support, great writing, and stewardship. And again, just to kind of reiterate something that Caroline said on Twitter this morning that I've already pointed out in another thing, is quality, not quantity. So write excellent work that is relevant for the grant maker. Do not, never do anything that anyone could ever accuse you of doing, called spray and pray, which is a horrific turn of phrase, but we obviously still see it because of that volume of ineligible applications. So those are the questions that came to me in advance of today, and I'm just once again checking in to make sure there's no other questions coming up. I can't see anything else coming up. I hope I'm not missing anything. No other questions have come up. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to finish with my standard plea, which is make sure you're looking after yourselves. Well, 2020 was something else, particularly for grant makers, whether we were furloughed and watched other people do our jobs, or whether we weren't furloughed and everyone else was. It was really, really hard, and quite a lot of that carried on into 2021. We maybe lost some of the emergency funds, but there was a huge amount of emphasis put on trust fundraising over the last 2 years. And I want us all to make sure we're looking after ourselves, putting ourselves first, taking the annual leave. There is such a thing as giving too much, and I'd like us all to sort of rein it back in and make sure that we're giving enough. We might be giving a little bit more than enough. That's absolutely fine, but making sure we're keeping some back for ourselves. It's 2022. We're all about we should all be about knowing that we need to look after ourselves first. So that's my plea out to all of you in the trust fundraising world is, please, let's look after ourselves and not do any big burnouts this year. So any tips for building confidence in picking up the phone to a trust fund, making a cold application, how to prepare? Oh gosh, do you know, Charlotte, I've literally just had a little bit of a flashback to the feeling of boom, 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 the first time I ever did it. I was so scared. It's ridiculous, isn't it? It's just a phone call. Like I'm chatting away to a computer screen now. I'm chatting away thin air now. So my tips are, think about what you want to say, have some questions you want answered, and practice. So particularly now we're all remote. I had a colleague in the other room in the office when I did it, and I literally did an internal call from the meeting room to her desk to help me practice. You know, there is no harm in practicing. If you're nervous and you think that that's going to ruin the call, practice until you feel a little bit less nervous. Literally practice going, hello, may I speak to so-and-so? Is now a good time? I'm from such and such charity. I'd really like to, I've got a couple of questions in advance of submitting an application. Could I ask you? You know, practice. What are you actually, how are you going to open that conversation? What are the words you're going to use? Write them down, speak them out loud, so that when you then make that phone call, you're less of a, and that might just be me, but that's how it felt that first time. And I had written it down. And my boss was there. She's a very supportive woman. And she said, you were very nervous. I think maybe a couple of practice phone calls. And so that's what I would say is just make sure you've got some really useful questions. Make sure you know your onions about the project that you're kind of half pitching to them. And don't be afraid to practice. Ask your colleague, ask your friends, ask your partner, ask someone in your life if you can just practice that skill. Because that is just such a, feeling. I've literally got there. It also reminds me of asking someone out when I was younger. Like it's that similar kind of I wonder if there's something similar about the fear of rejection going on there, because that feels like a really similar feeling to me, that moment you put yourself out there and it might not go well. And Charlotte, if it makes you feel better, it's never not gone well for me. Asking people out, not so much, but like professionally, it's never not gone well. Even those really nervous early calls, people were either kind enough to say, do you know, now is not a good time, or actually I don't have the opportunity to do phone calls, this would be easier. It was the first time I was doing it was probably in 2005, 2006, so it was kind of pre the mega use of emails that we have now, particularly in grant makers. So you know, they were either saying no, you can't, or they were saying, yeah, absolutely, now's not a good time, or what's your question? You know, no one is upset by that. And also, if we go back to that understanding that 1/3 of applications were ineligible, you imagine a quick phone call to reduce that number of ineligible applications would have been so helpful. Yeah, and I can't see who's writing these things. It's really annoying. I'm going to have to change my StreamYard settings. Helen has said, and most of the time the person on the phone isn't involved in the assessment process. They are just there to help. And she's been a funder and has loved chatting to potential applicants. So thanks, Helen. That's really nice to hear and reinforces what I've just said, which is, you know, and I've also always been told that if a funder doesn't want you to phone, they won't publish their phone number. And I think that is really wise, is they're publishing their phone number. This is the 21st century. We all know what happens if we put our phone numbers out there in the public domain. Someone might ring it, right? So if you don't want a phone call, don't publish your phone number is pretty standard now. So I think if they're publishing their phone number, then phone them. If they're publishing an email address, email them. Be polite, but don't beat about the bush too much, I guess. You know, be polite yet direct. You don't want to waste their time. So I'm glad that was helpful, Charlotte. I'm going to give everyone a chance to ask any further questions, because I'm aware there is a time delay between what I hear myself saying and what I see myself doing on the screen. This also gives me a moment to check for any new messages, which I don't think there are. No. So I'm going to say thank you all very much We are live most months. The only exceptions are August and December, and we are always on the third Thursday of the month. And what that means for February is that we are going to be live, or I am going to be live. I don't know why I say we, I'm not royalty. I'm going to be live at 12:15 on Thursday, the 17th of February, on Facebook and on Twitter and on LinkedIn. I absolutely undertake to do better with subtitles, so I apologise for that. And between now and then, this recording will be put onto YouTube, so anyone who does require subtitles and wasn't able to access them today will be able to watch the videos with closed captions on YouTube. So Thursday the 17th of February, and I want to say thank you, and I want to say bye bye.